Imagine a blade so sharp it could slice through bone, yet so flexible it could bend without breaking. To the Vikings, swords weren't just weapons, they were living symbols of honor, status, and divine power. But how did these fierce seafarers forge such extraordinary weapons over 1,000 years ago? Today, we're diving deep into the ancient secrets of Viking swordsmithing, the hidden techniques, the sacred rituals, and the incredible craftsmanship that made these blades legendary. To truly understand Viking swords, we first need to understand the culture that valued them so highly. The Viking Age, roughly from the late 8th to the 11th century, was a time when Scandinavian warriors sailed across Europe in longships, trading, raiding, and settling. Weapons were central to their society, but not all weapons were equal. Spears and axes were common, and even the poorest farmer might own one. But a sword, that was something different. A sword was rare, precious, and deeply personal. It marked a man as someone of wealth, status, and bravery. For the Vikings, forging a sword was more than metallurgy. It was almost a spiritual act. A good sword was called a soul friend. It was believed to carry part of the warrior's essence, sometimes even passed down through generations. Families treasured these blades for centuries, engraving new hilts or reforging the steel to suit new warriors. Unlike axes or spears, which could be replaced easily, a sword had memory, reputation, and soul. The blacksmiths who forged these swords were not ordinary craftsmen. In Viking society, they were considered almost magical. They understood the mysterious power of fire, iron, and transformation. In fact, some blacksmiths were seen as shamans, straddling the worlds of men and gods. Legends say smiths could even control destiny, weaving strength into steel with every hammer strike. Some sagas describe swords that had names, almost personalities, like Gram, the dragon slayer's blade, or Tyrfing, a cursed sword that demanded blood every time it was drawn. But what did these smiths actually work with? The main ingredient was iron ore, and interestingly, much of it came from bogs. Yes, swampy wetlands. Vikings would collect iron-rich earth, heat it in clay furnaces, and extract raw, bloom iron. This process left behind a spongy, uneven lump that had to be hammered again and again to remove impurities. It was painstaking work, but without it, there could be no sword. Yet bloom iron had a weakness. It was often too soft. To solve this, Viking smiths developed their greatest secret: pattern welding. Pattern welding was the heart of Viking sword making. Instead of relying on a single piece of metal, smiths took strips of iron and steel, twisted them together, folded them again and again, and hammered them into one solid piece. This not only made the blade stronger and more flexible, but it also created mesmerizing patterns across the steel. When polished, these designs looked like waves, lightning bolts, or serpent scales. Imagine a warrior drawing his sword in the sunlight, the blade shimmering with rippling patterns. It must have looked like a weapon alive with magic. And to the Vikings, that's exactly what it was. They believed these patterns weren't just decoration. They thought the steel itself held power, that the patterns were spirits of protection forged into the blade. Owning such a sword was like carrying both a weapon and a talisman of the gods. The forging process was a brutal dance between man, fire, and metal. The smith began by heating the iron and steel until it glowed white hot. At this stage, the metal was soft enough to shape. With rhythmic hammer strikes, he folded and twisted the glowing strips together, layer by layer, binding them into a single form. Slowly, what had once been raw earth transformed into the outline of a long double-edged sword. But the most dangerous step was still to come: quenching. After countless hours of hammering and shaping, the smith would heat the sword one last time and then plunge it into water or oil. This sudden cooling hardened the steel, but it was risky. Too hot and the blade could crack. Too cold and it might remain brittle. Ancient sagas even whisper of darker rituals, that some smiths quenched blades in animal blood or even human blood, believing it gave the weapon life. Whether or not that's true, one thing is certain. Quenching was seen as the moment a sword was born. Once the blade survived this trial, it was ground and polished until razor sharp. Then came the hilt. Viking hilts were often works of art, carved from wood and decorated with bone, horn, or precious metals like silver and bronze. Many featured intricate knotwork designs or runes, letters of the Old Norse alphabet, invoking protection from gods like Odin, Tyr, or Thor. Finally, the sword was given a name, because to the Vikings, a true warrior never carried an unnamed blade. Naming a sword gave it personality, identity, and fate. Among all Viking swords, one name stands out: Ulfbert. These were no ordinary swords. Archaeologists have uncovered dozens of blades inscribed with +ULFBERHT+. They were centuries ahead of their time, forged from steel so pure it rivaled the best European steel made almost 1,000 years later. How is this possible? Scholars believe that the secret lay in imported crucible steel, likely brought from Persia or India through trade routes. To hold an Ulfbert sword was to wield a superweapon, lighter, stronger, sharper than anything most warriors had ever seen. In today's terms, it was like owning a Lamborghini when everyone else rode horses. But swords weren't just weapons, they were spiritual companions. Some smiths sang chants as they worked, infusing their blades with power. Others carved runes into the steel, asking for blessings in battle. Warriors might dedicate their sword to the gods before combat, or bury it in rivers as an offering. And when a warrior died, his sword often died with him. Many Viking graves show swords deliberately bent or broken, a ritual act to release the weapon's spirit so it could accompany its master into the afterlife. Modern movies often exaggerate Viking swords as massive, heavy slabs of steel. The truth is more elegant. Viking swords were typically around 70 to 80 centimeters long, well balanced, designed for quick slashing strikes rather than brute force chopping. They weren't clumsy, they were precise. And in the hands of a skilled warrior, they were terrifying. The forging of a Viking sword was part science, part magic, and part legend. From swampy bog iron to glittering patterns of steel, each blade carried the spirit of the warrior who held it. These swords were more than tools of war. They were vessels of faith, artistry, and myth, hammered together in fire by smiths who held secrets lost for centuries. So next time you see a Viking sword in a museum or in a film, remember that it's not just metal. It's history, spirit, and legend combined. A Viking sword is fire made solid, destiny shaped in steel, a weapon that still whispers the stories of men who sailed into the unknown with their soul friends at their side. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you want more ancient secrets revealed. Until next time, may your steel never break.